Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition.
It's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Good morning, Crosspointe. I'm glad you're here. I'm really excited about what's coming up over the next hour. And to get us started, I asked my friend Alistair Vance to send a song. And this isn't a song that I was familiar with. I was happy to hear this song, and it's not one that I think is designed to sing along, so maybe you can just put down that pressure and just listen to the song, reflect on the lyrics, and hopefully you can find yourself in this song. I know I did. Al and I go back 10 years, I think, when he was first helping to get a church started in Durham called Story Church. And we've filled in for each other back and forth over the years. He led the music at Story Church for a lot of years. You might recognize Al if you came to our World Communion Sunday service back in the fall in October when we did it in the round. That was Al that day. So just take in this song, and hopefully you can find yourself in it. Glad you're here.
Say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still like an orphan, I guess. And my heart breaks to confess. Even while you hold me, as I cry on the floor, I still don't know how to be yours. Say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still like an orphan, I guess. And my heart breaks to confess. Even while you hold me, as I cry on the floor, I still don't know how to be yours.
Praise be the nurses and doctors, every medical staff bent over flesh to offer care, for lives saved and lives lost, for showing up either way. Praise for the farmers tilling soil, planting seeds so food can grow, an act of hope if ever there was. Praise be the janitors and garbage collectors, the grocery store clerks and the truck drivers barreling through long, quiet nights. Give thanks for bus drivers, delivery persons, postal workers, and all those keeping an eye on water, gas, and electricity. Blessings on our leaders making hard choices for the common good, offering words of assurance. Celebrate the scientists working away to understand the thing that plagues us, to find an antidote, and all the medicine makers. Praise be the journalists keeping us informed. Praise be the teachers finding new ways to educate children from afar, and blessings on parents holding it together for them. Blessed are the elderly and those with weakened immune systems, all those who worry for their health. Praise for those who stay at home to protect them. Blessed are the domestic violence victims on lockdown with abusers, the homeless and refugees. Praise for the artists and poets, the singers and storytellers, all those who nourish with words and sound and color. Blessed are the ministers and therapists of every kind, bringing words of comfort. Blessed are the ones whose jobs are lost, who have no savings, who feel fear of the unknown gnawing. Blessed are those in grief, especially who mourn alone. Blessed are those who have passed into the great night. Praise for police and firefighters, paramedics, and all who work to keep us safe. Praise for all the workers and caregivers of every kind. Praise for the sound of notifications, messages from friends reaching across the distance. Give thanks for laughter and kindness. Praise be our four-footed companions with no forethought or anxiety, responding only in love. Praise for the seas and rivers, forests and stones who teach us to endure. Give thanks for your ancestors, for the wars and plagues they endured and survived. Their resilience is in your bones, your blood. Blessed is the water that flows over our hands and the soap that helps keep them clean each time a baptism. Praise every moment of stillness and silence so new voices can be heard. Praise the chants and slowness. Praise be the birds who continue to sing the sky awake each day. Praise for the primrose poking yellow petals from dark earth. Blessed is the air clearing overhead so one day we can breathe deeply again. And when this has passed, may we say that love spread more quickly than any virus ever could. May we say this was not just an ending, but also a place to begin.
Hey, good morning, Crosspointe. This is Jonathan. So good to just be able to join with you this morning. Man, I love that quote that was shared at the very end of the video there, where she said, "When this has passed, may we say that love spread more quickly than any virus ever could." And man, I hope, and I know that's our collective hope, right? Our collective hope as a community is that in this season, love would spread quickly, more quickly than any virus ever could. And so I just want you to know how proud I am of all of you and the collective we as Crosspointe and what we've been able to do together. Last week was astounding, and all the different people we were able to love, all the different meals that we were able to share on Easter for firefighters and policemen all across the triangle, for grocery store workers and ICU unit doctors and janitorial staffs at hospitals, all sorts of different ways that you guys were just pouring out love on people and serving meals for Easter lunch and dinner. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. Here's a selfie. I'll show you a picture of a selfie of a fire station that sent us. And then just the other day, I got this email that said, "Dear Crosspointe Church, I want to thank you on behalf of the Rex ICU team. We are greatly touched by the church's generosity. The Easter barbecue meal was delicious. Please continue to keep us in your prayers and please stay safe. Sincerely, Jerry Hung, MD." The fact that they would even take the time out of their crazy busy schedule just to email us and say thank you, that's incredibly humbling. But again, it's just a testament to all that you guys are doing and the way that you're spreading love in all sorts of really great and beautiful ways right now. I also want to let you know that what's happening at our campus week in and week out, since quarantine began, we've been able to distribute over 3,000 meals to people. So this doesn't include all that we did last weekend with all the first responders and essential workers. But on top of that, based on the food that's been distributed, we've been able to contribute over 3,000 meals. That's amazing. And again, it's because of your all's generosity, what you continue to contribute, that we've been able to do that. One of the things, though, that we've recognized as we've been trying to feed people and as we've listened to their stories and got to know them week after week is just the gap in people being able to have fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh dairy. And understandably, those things don't keep very well when they're being stored and you have to wait to understand how they're getting delivered. But now that we've gotten to a rhythm of knowing a lot of these families, what we're going to do this week is we're going to go and buy a ton of fresh fruits and vegetables. So we've working with some people who work in the food industry so that we can do this really well. And then we can get fresh fruits and vegetables to these families immediately. And so we're just going to take money that you guys have already contributed just as part of Crosspointe and normal stuff, and we're going to then just buy a ton of it. And I'm really excited about that. Even more so, I got excited because the YMCA, the Northwest Cary YMCA, heard what we were doing with this particular thing. And so they, being great partners that they are, they wanted to jump in. So they're going to match the amount of money that we spend this week on fresh fruits and vegetables so that we can double that. So kudos to them, man. I'm so grateful for the Y, what they're doing with Camp Hope, what they're doing in all sorts of different ways. When we started this Y project years ago, we believed that we could do way more together as organizations than we could do individually. And so I'm just really grateful, all the different ways we get to link arms with them to love and serve people in our city. And so we're going to continue to do the things that we've been doing. We're still paying rent. We're still paying utilities. We're still paying different bills for people as more job losses happen and as more people get laid off or going without paychecks right now. We're doing our best to try to fill the gap and to stand in those gaps for people and come alongside them, because that's what love looks like in moments like this. And so, yeah, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing there. Now, if you read the email that I sent out on Friday morning, I said that it was time to unleash a new wave of love on people. And that last weekend, what we were able to do with all the first responders and essential workers was awesome, but that it was time to unleash a new wave of love on a new group of people. And the reality is there's all sorts of different groups, right? All different types of people who are all carrying unique stresses and anxiety right now. It's just, everybody has the stress. We all just are carrying different ones and unique ones. But one group that's carrying unique stress right now is teachers. And we wanted to figure out a way to love and honor and show some appreciation to them. So Jennifer Tuttle, many of you know, is our student pastor. We call her JT. And JT, you may not know, was a teacher in the Durham public school systems for 15 years. And she's brilliant, and she has a wonderful heart, and she's a tremendous leader. And I wanted to spend some time with her this week. And so I interviewed her to try to understand what teachers are going through right now, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, so we could get better insight into that. So right after this service, you can find on our YouTube channel, there'll be another video that pops up as my interview with JT. And I hope that you'll take, it's just like 10 minutes. I hope you'll take those 10 minutes and listen to her express just the unique stresses and anxieties that teachers are wrestling with right now. And so we'll post it on social media and other ways, but I hope that you'll take a few minutes just to listen to that and to understand the heart behind doing what we're going to do this week. So what we've done is we've gone ahead this week and we've bought 500 gift cards for teachers. So we've already bought them. So we bought 500 different gift cards for teachers. And now in order to make this plan work, we need a ton of you to participate to unleash this wave of love. So here's how we plan on this working. So tomorrow morning, Monday, we're going to send out a link via email. If you're not on our email distribution list, you want to jump on that, go to crosspoint.org/enews, and then just sign up for that. You'll get all the emails that we send out about this kind of stuff. And so we'll send the link out, and then all you have to do is let us know how many teachers that you want to honor and how many you need gift cards for. Now, in order so we can have as many different people participate as we can, we're going to try to limit it to start off limiting it to one teacher per elementary student and then 2 teachers per middle school and high school student in your home. So you all discuss as a family, as a student, and as a parent, if this applies to you, and then talk about, okay, who do we want to honor? You let us know how many gift cards you need. We'll send you those gift cards digitally via email, and then your job is to write a very personalized, encouraging, honoring email that acknowledges the stress and the unique things that they're carrying right now, because we want to make sure teachers feel heard. We want to make sure that they feel seen. And so I hope, again, that's why you'll take a chance to listen to JT's interview, her talk, before you do that, and then you'll write them a note. And then you'll attach this gift card to it, and just that together we'll unleash a wave of love on teachers in our area this week. And furthermore, what I hope happens, I hope it's a catalyst where that story spreads to other communities. And just like we talked about at the beginning, that love spreading more quickly in our virus, I'm hoping in other cities and other places, maybe this will catch on, and then nationwide, we can figure out, here's a unique way that we can lean into helping and honoring teachers. Teacher Appreciation Week's coming up, but that's probably getting canceled anyway, or people are going to forget that because we're not in school, all that kind of stuff. This is a way for us to help stand in that gap as a church. And I hope that it's a catalyst to a lot of people showing a lot of love. And so hope that you'll do that. Hope that you'll take advantage of that. Hope you get excited about that because I think it's going to do a lot of good. Now, with all these kinds of different things, as we say every week, if you want to continue to contribute to Crosspointe and all that Crosspointe is doing and what we're funding together, you can go to crosspoint.org/contribute. Or you can text the number. We'll put it at the bottom of the screen here, 77977. It will send you a link directly on your phone that then you can hit the link. It'll take you to that website and you can contribute there. All sorts of other ways you can contribute via snail mail. You can contribute PayPal, lots of different ways, stocks, lots of different ways that people want to contribute right now. But our hope and our collective hope as a leadership of Crosspointe is that you feel like that when you're contributing to fund Crosspointe and all projects like this, that you feel like that it's holistically meeting the needs of people, that by contributing to Crosspointe, we're able to help meet a variety of needs through food, through rent, through utility payments, through helping people with job loss, through honoring teachers, honoring essential workers, and all sorts of different ways that we're trying to leverage every single dollar in the best way possible to meet the holistic needs of people week in and week out. And so it's an honor to link arms with you. It's an honor to get to participate in all this with you. Now, last thing, and I mentioned in the email as well that we were going to have a special guest this weekend, and I'm so excited to share this interview with you that you're about to see. It's an interview with a gentleman named Jeff Chu. Jeff grew up in California, and then he went to high school in Miami, where he sat behind Alex Rodriguez in class. For all you baseball fans, sat behind Alex, and then he went on to become a full-time journalist. He worked for Time Magazine and Fast Company Magazine for 15 years as a full-time journalist for them. He covered and interviewed people like Britney Spears and Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry, but he also covered things all across the world, and like traveling to Rwanda and talking about the rebuilding of Rwanda after the genocide. And so he's just got a breadth of experience all over the globe and with all sorts of different people. Then several years ago, I think about 6 years ago, he wrote a book entitled, "Does Jesus Really Love Me? A Gay Christian's Pilgrimage in Search of God in America," which is a fantastic book, just awesome book. It's just a book of stories and people's experiences all across the spectrum. And so if that's a book that you haven't read, I'd encourage you to pick that up. It's well worth your time. Jeff, in recent years, has gone on to Princeton Seminary, where he's graduated, and now he and his husband, Tristan, live together in Michigan. And here's what I want you to know. You're going to love Jeff. I mean, Jeff is just a phenomenal human being. He really is. And so in this interview, we talk about his life journey a bit, but the reason we most wanted to talk to Jeff was we're all experiencing grief in different ways right now, all of us, and all sorts of different loss that we've all experienced. And when we talked about who could be a voice to help speak into our community about that, collectively, over and over again, Jeff's name came up because he has such great wisdom to speak about grief and about loss and pain and how to be vulnerable and honest about that. And so I'm so honored that when we called Jeff, that he agreed to sit down with us. He's got a huge travel schedule and a busy schedule, travels all over the world, but that he would carve out some time to hang out with our community. And the time that I got to spend with him was better than I could have imagined. And he is all that I hoped that he would be, of getting to talk to him in person. And so I'm super excited that you're going to get to learn from his heart and from his wisdom. And I really hope that just this talk and this interview and getting to hear from him is really helpful to you guys. And so, Crosspointe, enjoy my interview with Jeff Chu.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. And it's such an honor to speak with you, and such an honor that you would come and give our community some time to share from your heart and your wisdom and your expertise. And so we're just really grateful to have you. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up first was that I think it was 6 years ago. If the publishing date's right on Amazon, it was pretty close to right to 6 years ago that you wrote a book called Does Jesus Really Love Me? A Gay Christian's Pilgrimage in Search of God in America. And so I had to write some notes here, so I'll look down here and there just because I wanted to make sure I got all this covered. But I was wondering if you could just share some of your journey with us that inspired you to write that book, and then maybe perhaps some things that you've learned over the last 6 years since that book was launched into the world.
So the book really came out of the convergence of my work as a journalist. I was a full-time journalist for a long time, working for Time Magazine and the business magazine Fast Company, and my personal faith journey. I grew up Southern Baptist. My grandfather was a preacher. My uncle still is a preacher in Hong Kong. My grandmother was a primary school Bible teacher. So this was the culture of our family. That was who we were. If you weren't ordained, then you were at least a deacon or Women's Missionary Union member or leader. Sure. And that was the expectation I was brought up with. Of course, I was going to be a deacon at some point, right?
Yeah.
And when I came out after college, that blew everything up. My undergraduate chaplain, after I came out, said that clearly my homosexuality wasn't real. It was a reflection of the fact that I didn't have a healthy relationship with my Heavenly Father. And if I didn't have a healthy relationship with my Heavenly Father, I couldn't have a healthy relationship with my earthly father. And if I fixed those two things, then that would address my sexuality. That was one of the moments that drove me away from church for a few years, because I couldn't make sense of that. It took me a while to come to the point where I could discern between God and the church, between God and the people who claim to speak for God. But I still wasn't ready at that point to come back to church. So I did what I knew how to do, which is ask questions and write people's stories down. That's what I've spent my entire professional career doing up until a couple of years ago, full time. So I got someone to pay for me to travel. I got a publisher who was willing to put up some money so that I could go across America and ask people why they believed what they believed, what had either kept them in church or driven them out of it, and how they understood their faith and their sexuality. I was determined to do it all the way across the theological spectrum, because I wanted that full range. I couldn't find any books that met me where I was, which was in a place of not knowing. Every book that I found was preaching at me from a particular theological position. That might be fine for some people, but I get really tired of theological debates and proof texting and folks at any point on the spectrum just pulling out scripture and saying, here's one verse, therefore.
Absolutely.
I didn't encounter a lot of folks who were willing to sit with me and say, so what do you want? What do you think God is saying? What do you hear? And in the absence of that, I decided to go out and find it. I wanted to understand from average people in the pews. What has your experience been? Why do you feel close to God or far from God? How do you even understand God? And through those stories, I was able to make sense a little bit of my own story.
Yeah.
The world has obviously changed a lot since the book came out. So when the book was published, gay marriage was legal in a handful of states, and now it's legal all across the country. And when I wrote the book specifically addresses gay and lesbian experiences. There might be a couple of stories of bi people in there. It doesn't address the transgender experience. The transgender experience has really come more fully into the public consciousness since then, right? And the church's consciousness. So that's another thing I've been learning about, right? Gender identity is a very different set of questions and conundrums for the church and theological discussions than sexuality is. And so we are now beginning to see the richness, but also the complexity of those debates. So if I were to write it today, obviously there are things that I would do differently, right? Obviously there are voices that I would engage differently. But I think the book was true to where I was then, which was really in a place of searching about sexuality specifically and faith.
Yeah. Well, if anybody hasn't read that book, I'd highly recommend it. So you need to go out and get Jeff's book and read it because it's just a great read and you're a fantastic writer. And I actually encountered you at Fast Company before I encountered you as an author of the book. I used to read Fast Company all the time. And that's where I was like, man, I recognize that name when we first crossed paths. But I'm wondering if, fast forwarding now, if there's some common themes and stories that you find yourself today hearing from kind of our siblings in the LGBTQ plus community, just in terms of their life in faith communities and kind of what you're hearing from them.
I don't actually think that what I hear from my queer and trans siblings is that different from what I hear from folks who have other identities. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, I mean, we all want to be seen and heard and loved. And we're also, for the most part, afraid to be known. We're all looking for belonging. And we're trying so often to claim that. And it's a messy process sometimes. That's why you see what you see on Twitter. Mm. And you see that in all different ways, from all different perspectives, in all different very human manifestations, right? So when some people want to be seen and heard, they lash out. When other people want to be seen and heard, they offer something that's attention-getting. When another type of person wants to be seen and heard, they hide in the hopes that someone will come looking for them. So for those of us who happen to be identifying as sexual minorities, that might be the issue that threatens our belonging. But I think this is true across the board. It's a deeply human experience to want to be seen and known and heard, accepted and loved, not just by other people, but by God. It's just unfortunate that one of the other common themes that I see is a lack of grace for people's journeys. And I see that in the queer community as much as I see it in the rest of the world. Sometimes we seem to forget that everyone's in process. And the very person that you might be attacking for what they tweeted or posted on Facebook or said to your face might be actually a version of yourself from 10 years ago. When I think back to some of the things I said and did when I identified as more conservative and maybe more dogmatic about some theological issues, I would hope that I would have grace for that version of Jeff, knowing that all of us are works in progress. So the lack of grace troubles me, even as I understand where it comes from. Because we want to draw those lines sometimes because they're lines that are drawn for good reasons, for protection, for advocacy, for the safety of other people. The other common theme that I am finding, and that's hard for me to reckon with, is that so many of us who grew up in fundamentalist cultures found a way to shift our theology, but stuck with a fundamentalist point of view. So we become incredibly doctrinaire about whatever it is that we now believe. And there's not a lot of space for those who are different, or for those who, for whatever reason, have differing convictions. And I have a super hard time with that. My parents are still at a very different place with their theology. I don't think it's right to publicly shame them for that. I believe they're faithful people. That's really difficult for some of my friends to hear. It feels like compromise. My theology is reformed, and I keep going back over and over and over to grace. To the point that I've had folks walk out of my readings. There was a guy at a reading in Miami. I had read a chapter about Westboro Baptist Church, which is the church, for those who don't know, in Topeka, Kansas, who hold up the God hates fags signs, right? And there's a part in the chapter where I talk about how much I learned about grace in Topeka, because I was thinking about how I don't deserve God's grace any more than any of those people holding those signs. Because grace isn't something you deserve, right? Grace isn't something you earn. It's unmerited favor. And in some sense, we all stand on level ground before God. And when I said that, during the Q&A section, this one man got up, referenced what I had said, and he said, I believe in love and grace too, but you have to draw the line somewhere, and you've gone too far. And I said, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. And he walked out. So it's hard to let go of certainty. It's hard to let go of fundamentalism. We like our little theological fortresses, right? The places where we can kind of shoot the cannonballs out at the people who are coming towards us. And I just don't think that is a life-giving or faithful model for how to be in the world.
Yeah. No, I so appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's one of the most compelling things about you is your just heart of grace and the way that you can communicate that and the way that you live that. And I remember I first crossed paths with you when the dots got connected of, oh, this is the Fast Company author. I think in 2015, you were giving a keynote at a conference that I was streaming, and you gave a talk called, I think you titled it like Together at the Table. And I remember watching that, and it just had a significant effect on me. And so I just want to make sure that it's an honor to thank you to your face, even virtually, but just for your voice and leadership, for love and inclusion in the body of Christ and for everyone, and your grace for that, because you helped me significantly wake up to some blind spots that I had and some significant blind spots that I had. And you helped move me out of ambiguity to say, that for me, how do I be loving and graceful to people in their process, but at the same time, I can't just be ambiguous because if I'm only being ambiguous on things, which I was just kind of, hey, let's keep everyone, happy, then I was only assisting an oppressive voice and not a victim voice in that way with my ambiguity. And you really helped me and have continued to just profoundly shape my life. And not only on this issue of sexuality in the church and with faith, but just in so many other ways, and other ways of just learning from you and from your experience. And so I'm hoping that's what I was hoping to also get to talk with you about some things additionally, because I think one of the things is you practice farming. And that was one of the things that most intrigued me about you through the years. And so I was like, okay, I wonder if we could shift into that a little bit so that we could talk about your experience with farming and what it's taught you about life and how farming has shaped your life and just perspective and your faith by practicing that. So, because I find that just really intriguing. So,
sure. I think folks should know that I didn't grow up on a farm. My people are city people and suburban people. I will say it wasn't until I started working on this farm that I began to hear stories from my parents. We were raising chickens, and it emerged that my parents knew how to slaughter and defeather chickens. And I was like, how do you know this? Back in the 50s and 60s in Hong Kong, people had chickens on their balconies and in the courtyards of their apartment buildings. And it was just a part of their childhood that we'd never talked about. So it's just really interesting how your heritage sometimes comes back to surprise you. I did not work on a farm until I went to seminary. So Princeton Seminary has a 21-acre sustainable farm that doubles as a classroom. It's called the Farminary. You can see where they got the name from. And it was started in 2015 as an experiment. There was a graduating PhD student named Nate Stuckey who had grown up on a farm, had been a farm manager, and his dream was to use a farm and land to teach theology, because we see over and over and over in Scripture stories of the land. And yet we understand them so poorly. And his hypothesis was, if I can get students out here on the land, we'll be able to learn something about these Bible stories, about God, about God's creation, and about ourselves in a way that we haven't been able to because we've been sitting at desks with laptops in front of us staring at screens. I honestly signed up for that first class just because I didn't want to be in a traditional classroom for all 4 classes that semester. And it turned out to be one of the most liberating, empowering experiences of my life. The first night of class, one of the professors, it was a class that was co-taught, she said, "We expect love to grow here. That is the only expectation we have of this class." I've never had a teacher say that. Love has never been the point of any class that I've taken. And that kind of blew my mind. And once we started working the soil, the conversations that you can have with people when you're doing something with your body other than typing, the stories that are bubbling up inside of you and inside of the folks that you're weeding with or planting with or sowing with, it's hard to explain how profound that is. It was also super humbling to realize how detached so many of us are from what we eat. I will never forget, it was probably about 2 years into my experience at the farm when it came time to slaughter our first flock of chickens. That forever changed my experience of eating. Most of us have only had the experience of buying chicken that is shrink wrapped or in the butcher case. You don't have to look at the bird with its head on and with its feathers. You don't have to look at a bird that you saw as a 2-day-old chick and raised, right? And to know that I'd had a hand in the entire life of this bird. And now, if I wanted to roast it, and I'm not a vegetarian, right? I had to have a hand in bringing that life to an end. You honor your food in a different way once you had to do that. Once you have seen the reality that is hiding behind our consumer culture, right? Our culture of convenience has allowed us not to look death in the eye, whether it's animals or humans. And I think we've paid a price for that. We dishonor the land that our food comes from. I could go on about the Farminary all day long. So
no, it's great. I love the writing that you've had that's come out of that, some of the experiences that you've written about and shared about. It's just really powerful. Now, that idea that you talked about with the uncomfortableness of death, I find that more and more just that seems like one of the things that our culture in faith communities is getting more and more uncomfortable with is confronting the reality of death or just the reality of loss. And so I've listened to you share about some insights recently over the last year specifically, and different things that you've gone through of learning what you've learned about grief and about loss. And so I'm wondering maybe if you could share some of those insights that you've learned about grief, learning to dance together with faith and the importance of grief and how we wrestle with that.
So I have unfortunately had to think more about grief over the last year than I've wanted to. I've lost some people who are close to me. And that's something that happens, right? And it's just fascinating to see how different people grieve. As someone who's been through seminary and is now in the ordination process, one of the things that I studied, I took a class on death and dying. And the professor talked about how in our culture now, we don't like to do funerals anymore. We like to have celebrations of life.
All the time. I get requested for that. Yeah.
And there is a loss there because a celebration of life, not a bad thing to do as part of the grieving process. At what point do you gather with other people and face death and face the reality of it and try to understand what it means? We're never going to have a healthy understanding of what God has done for us if we're not willing to confront the reality of death. Jesus died. When we look back at Jesus's life, it includes that ugly death. Yes, there's resurrection after that, but the resurrection only is what it is, as significant as it is to those of us who claim to be Christian, because the death happened, right? And so I think we lose something when we have people in our lives who die, and then we refuse to acknowledge the reality of the death. So one of the things that I think is important about acknowledging the reality of death is that as Christians, we get to claim resurrection hope, right? We get to pivot to the hope. But it's not a hope of immortality. And I think that's sometimes what people forget. We still, in this life, have to move through death. We're promised resurrection, not immortality. Also, by gathering, by remembering, by grieving, we're enacting, in some ways, a lived out embodied prayer. We're saying, as humans, we can't make sense of this, and there's something beyond us. And we surrender this to you, God. Do with it what you will. Help us get through this. Help us acknowledge the need to mourn. Help us sit in our sadness. That's a profound act of trust that God invites us into, that is modeled for us in Scripture. And it's something that I don't think is honored sufficiently in our culture. We're detached from it, and we want maybe not to be uncomfortable, because grief is hard. Losing someone's hard. Mourning is hard. It's exhausting. Anyone who's gone through it can tell you. But I don't think celebrating the life and putting a period at the end of that makes it any less exhausting. There is something deeply human about the grieving process and walking through that, not just with each other, but with God.
Yeah, that's so important. And it seems like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've in church settings, but sometimes there's this expectation that people feel like that you should always be made to feel happy all the time. that church should make you feel happy and that faith is equivalent to being happy. And so it turns into this a term we've talked about here recently as toxic positivity, where it just becomes, oh no, like this is what it means to be faithful, is it's just to be positive all the time. And so I'm wondering if there's some passages that have been especially meaningful to you in the scriptures that just give you kind of permission to feel and to be really vulnerable, to be really honest about grief and about pain, and that's a really important part of the faith journey and not something that just gets cut off and dealt with in the shadows.
Yeah, I guess we should clarify that there's all kinds of grief, right? We've talked mainly about the grief of death, but I think life is full of all kinds of little deaths. Even this strange season we're going through right now, people are experiencing the grief of the loss of, for instance, personal time and space. If you're a parent who's suddenly in your house with your kids all day long, we're experiencing the grief of the loss of freedom, right? The autonomy that we had to be able to go wherever we want, whenever we want, or that's what we tell ourselves anyway, right? The grief of losing the ability to hug someone or connect with someone face to face. These are all griefs that are valid and need grieving, for lack of a better word. So Romans 12:15 is super helpful. It's very simple. We've all heard it before. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. And one of the interesting things to me about it is Paul doesn't put any caveats on that. Paul doesn't say, mourn with those who have a credible reason for mourning, or mourn with those who have lost what you think is a sufficient loss that's worthy of your time and attention.
That's so important. Yeah.
It's just mourn with those who mourn. So I'm one of the co-curators of this conference, Evolving Faith, and on our in our private Facebook group, not too long ago, as this whole strange season of physical distancing was starting out, I said, I want you all to name your griefs. And any post that comes even close to shaming someone else for what their grief is going to be deleted immediately. Because we don't have time for that. We don't have to act as if we're competing in some kind of suffering Olympics. There are no gold medals if you have lost, quote unquote, more than anyone else. We're not ranking grief. Grief is a part of our lives. And I'm not going to say that, you have, quote unquote, suffered more because your day looks like this. And so has suffered less because their day looks like this. This is just not how it works. The Bible is full of wonderful stories of people being met in their anxiety, their fear, their uncertainty, their grief. So one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament is Hagar. So the concubine / slave of Abraham, right? Disfavored, not really a wife. She's the first person in Scripture who has the audacity to give God a new name. Because God finds her as she's weeping in the desert, feeling like there is no hope for her. And God comes to her in that grief and sees her. And so she names him El Roi, the one who sees. You have the Psalms. The Psalms are full of examples of psalmists who say really daring, crazy things to God, blaming God for suffering, right? And what that tells me is God can handle it. Psalm 88 is one that I speak about sometimes because that psalm is one of the few that never ends in praise. It is unresolved grief. And what that says to me is, it's okay. You can curse God, you can blame God. That will never do anything to diminish God's love for you. There is something powerful in that, to say you can be fully candid and vulnerable with God, because God already knows it anyway, right? So Sometimes I think to myself, what am I hiding? What's the point of hiding, right? If I believe in a God who knows all and knows me better than even I know myself, why am I wasting time editing my prayers? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So Psalm 88 is incredibly liberating. It's a huge invitation to say, no, not every one of your prayers has to end in, oh my gosh, God, you are so great, you are awesome. Sometimes you just want to be like, God, life sucks. And I'm wondering whether you're to blame for that because you have not showed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always known you as the God who saves. Day and night I cry out, but you hide your face. I'm overwhelmed with troubles, drawing near the grave. Your wrath weighs heavy on me, and I can't escape. Lord, why do you reject me? Will I meet this end? My eyes are dimmed with grief. Darkness is my closest friend. Oh, 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 oh. I cry to you for help. Would you turn your ear? I'm in the darkest pit, and you put me here. I've borne your terrors, I've suffered in despair. You've taken all my friends, cut me from your care. Lord, why do you reject me? Will I meet this end? My eyes are dimmed with grief. Darkness is my closest friend. Lord, why do you reject me? Will I meet this end? My eyes are dimmed with grief. Darkness is my closest friend. Oh, 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 oh. I have always known you as the God who saves. Day and night I cry out, but you hide your face.
It's notable that the book of Psalms doesn't end on Psalm 88, right? There's 89, 90, and onward. 109 is a really interesting psalm to me. So this is a psalm where the psalmist is feeling embattled and under attack by unnamed enemies. And the psalmist dares to say, "May my enemy's children be orphans and his wife a widow." I mean, that's a prayer in a book that we consider to be holy. This is something that a psalmist says to God and asks for. And it's written down there and translated and left for us. What do we do with that, right?
Yeah.
And it says to me that God can handle even our most profane thoughts, our worst wishes for someone. And better to entrust it to God who can handle that than to spew it on the world, which shouldn't, right? That psalm does end in a better place. That psalm does take a direction toward acknowledging God's steadfast love. And then there's Jesus. So you have Jesus in John 11 weeping about Lazarus, his friend. We have grief embodied in the one we believe also embodies love, right? And Luke 19, Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. So two instances where grief is clearly present for Jesus. If Jesus can grieve, surely I can summon the strength too. And I say strength too because it's countercultural.
Right.
It takes courage in this society to name the thing that you're grieving. To be vulnerable about what it is that you love so much.
So true.
That you can name it in that way and not be embarrassed about it. Especially with toxic masculinity, right? I had to learn how to cry again. My grandmother had told me, don't cry. All through my childhood, that's what I heard. Every time she saw me cry.
Because it's weakness.
Big boys don't cry.
That's right.
Big boys don't cry.
Yeah.
As an adult, I had to learn to cry. To grieve things that I have gone through and things that I've suffered, and to learn to cry with someone. One of the most powerful examples that has ever been set for me was a friend of mine sitting next to me. We were in theologically very different places at the time. I would say we're closer now than we were then. He sat next to me, never said a word, leaned his shoulder into mine. He's a straight white man. I'm a gay Chinese man. And he just let the tears fall. His tears for my suffering. That was a lesson and a sermon without him ever saying a word. Because I saw his love in that, in being willing to share my grief, so that I didn't have to carry it alone.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Well, Jeff, as we wrap things up, I'm wondering if, I know you mentioned, we were talking about before, and you just have this gift of teaching and communicating and writing and speaking. But I know even some of your work that you do in the church now, I'm wondering if you could just maybe pastor us for a bit, if you could share some final words to go, and knowing that sometimes pastoring is, I need to remind you of some things, and pastoring sometimes is I need to challenge you with some things, and encourage you with some things. So just as you're looking across the landscape of just the big C church right now, and just even culture, and to say, okay, yeah, here's the things that are resonating deep in your heart, and saying, here's some things that I feel that keep coming up in me, that I feel compelled to share. And so I'd wonder if we could just kind of sit underneath your leadership voice for a moment and let you kind of pastor us and challenge us a bit.
So I do have some thoughts that I'll share. I want to preface it by saying you've said really nice things about me. I'm not some saint. I'm not someone who has any special spiritual insight. I'm just trying to get through this life in a way that honors God and doesn't hurt the people around me. And I think we're all in the same boat in that sense, right? So we've already touched on some of what I would hope for you and what I pray for you all. Let yourself mourn the things that need to be mourned, and come alongside others who are mourning too. A lot of folks, so I'm working at a church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I've heard from a lot of folks recently, I just need comfort. Oh, that song was so comforting. I'm so glad we did morning devotions today because that passage was just comforting. And I've been thinking a lot about that word comfort. What is comfort for? I'm a word geek, so I went back and I did some reading. And the way comfort is used in Scripture, and the way comfort as a word came about, it was never, ever an individual thing. Comfort was never something that you sought to acquire for your own safety. Comfort was something that you offered to someone else, almost as an exhortation, as an encouragement. Comfort was always about community. Comfort was always about sharing. So especially for those of you right now who need comfort, my encouragement is that you look beyond yourself, because you will find greater comfort in encouraging someone else who might be sharing some of the same griefs that you're sharing, or some of the same stresses, or some of the same anxieties, or some of the same fears. Don't seek out your own comfort and just sit there in it, because that's not what it's for. Our comfort is not for ourselves. Our comfort is always to be shared. And then the last thing, I'm kind of like a broken record about this, but the last thing I would want whoever is watching this to know is you are loved. You are loved with a love that is beyond even what you could hope for. That is not license for you to behave badly. That is not license for you to do whatever you want. That is not permission for you to just be messy in a way that causes trouble for other people. But it is a word of grace that whatever you may do wrong, however you may hurt other people, however you may want to hurt and hurt yourself, you're still loved. And nothing can change that. That's something that has taken me a long time to come around to understanding. There are days when I struggle with it. I just recorded a sermon last night where I talk about God's love and how sometimes its absence is almost like this physical thing. There will be moments, days, weeks, sometimes maybe even months or years, where the physicality of God's absence can feel almost overwhelming. And on those days, when you need reminders of that love, go out, dig in the soil. It's springtime. A blooming magnolia or a dogwood. The breath in your lungs as you are either smelling the air or enduring hay fever. That breath is evidence of God's love. It's grace that you are breathing, that you don't even have to think about that process. Grow something. It's not super difficult to take a cup, dig up a little dirt, and plant a couple basil seeds. I think you can get seeds for like 99 cents at the hardware store. Grow something and see the grace and find the evidence of God's love in that. There are gifts all around us, and many days I'm staring at my computer screen and I forget to look around. And then I need the reminder of God's love. It's there for you. It's waiting. God is always there waiting to give you another embrace.
Jeff, thanks so much. Yeah, and it just knowing some of your journey and all that you've walked through and your own grief and suffering, for you to be able to remind us of that is a really great gift. So thank you for that. And hey, how can people? I want to make sure you have an opportunity that people, if they want to follow you, if this is the first time people are getting to encounter your voice, and how can they keep up with you, stuff that you're doing, projects you're working on, things, how can people follow you?
So 2 weeks ago, I did a scary thing for me, which is I started a newsletter. It's free. So it's jeffchew.substack.com. It's called Notes of a Make-Believe Farmer. It's really hard for me to not be able to hide behind someone else's story anymore. So when I was writing for Time Magazine and Fast Company, I was writing for those publications, right? I was just a staff writer. So I was writing in the voice of Time or writing in the voice of Fast Company. And when I wrote my book, I was telling other people's stories so I could hide behind that. And so starting this little newsletter is this leap of faith that maybe I might have something worthwhile to say of my own. So yeah, jeffchew.substack.com. It doesn't cost anything, but I would be grateful if anyone wanted to come and spend time with me there. And then my favorite of the social media platforms is Instagram. My handle is @byjeffchew, BYJEFFCHU. I like Instagram the best because it's visual. People are less mean.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
if you follow me there, you'll find a lot of pictures of like dirt.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, Jeff, thanks so much on behalf of our community. Thank you. Thank you for the life that you're living. Thank you for your voice, your wisdom and your courage, and most of all, your love. And so it's an honor to get to spend some time with you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right.
Welcome home.